Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to another episode of the Steelers Q&A. My name is Jeremy Betts. I am your host for this show where we answer your questions live on YouTube, X, and Facebook. You can jump on in any of those platforms and listen in live. If you missed the live show, you can obviously join in through audio wherever you get your podcasts later on down the road. I've got a guest that is no stranger to this show, but somebody that we always like to have on, and no stranger to the Steel Curtain Network either. He is everywhere, especially this time of year. It's my good buddy Shannon White. Shannon, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing wonderful Sunday afternoon and
Good.
family Sunday dinner, and now I always look forward to being on the Q&A with my brother Jeremy and get to talk and answer questions for the community.
Absolutely. And, Shannon, I don't know if we've spoken since the end of the season. I know we had maybe a show right before the playoffs sometime, maybe week 16 or 17, somewhere along those lines. So it's been a while since we've talked together on a show, but, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. We find ourselves in a spot that as fans, we've been pretty familiar with since the Roethlisberger era ended. It's just kind of like, okay, what next? How do you take the next step? And so I think all of us fans, those in the live chat across the board on social media, we all have our different ideas of how this thing gets rolling. But Shannon, what's your kind of overall thought about this offseason here that maybe you'd like to share on this show for the listeners here that might not have heard you on some other shows?
Yeah, I haven't wrote as many articles since the offseason started because I really wanted to see what the Steelers were going to do at offensive coordinator, because that was the next key piece to the puzzle. I think that Tomlin was like, I'm not signing an extension until they decide, am I going to get to pick this offensive coordinator? The way Mr. Rooney said it, that it was 100% Tomlin's decision, I think for the first time it really was. And now that they've signed Arthur Smith, it's a 3-year deal. I think we'll see Tomlin do a 2-year extension. Now, that's important because they're tied together now. I actually have an article coming out tomorrow about this Arthur Smith hiring and why he is the perfect offensive coordinator for Mike Tomlin. Because when Mr. Rooney said he wanted something new and innovative, we all immediately thought Shanahan, Tree, McVay. But honestly, he's very old school, and Mike Tomlin's old school to the core. So I think it could be a very good marriage. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You could still be innovative and have old school. The main thing is he likes to run first to set up the pass versus the more modern, innovative offenses throw to set up the run. So, and the way the Steelers offense, the roster is constructed, he seems like a very good fit. So I read your 2 articles that you put out recently, part 1 and part 2, about the offseason and what we'd like to see. And I wholeheartedly agree with your assessments. I want to see it build the foundations, strengthen the roster, and then make a wise decision about the quarterback once you actually know what you have. So, I'm very excited because I think they finally embraced the rebuild fully, not reload, not try to add a piece, because they're not one piece away. So, I'm very excited, and hopefully everybody else is excited and truly realizes what they're trying to do right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you come to the place where the Pittsburgh Steelers are right now, it's a place that we haven't seen since the early 2000s. I mean, where you don't have the superstar quarterback, and you have to make things work around him, to get there. And what did the Steelers do in that time frame? That's what I look to. And yes, it's a different league, but the foundations can still be the same. Great offensive line play, great defensive line play, great defense, and then you just load it up every year on new skill position talent to keep it going. And you, while you work through your Cordell Stewarts and your Tommy Maddoxes until you got to you're Ben Roethlisberger. And when that happened, guess what happened? You started winning Super Bowls. So it's very important, like you're talking about, like I mentioned in a lot of my articles there, to keep your core strong. So that way, once you do land that quarterback, and you've got to do whatever you can to try to find that guy in the process, if you can keep that core together, then you plug in that quarterback, and then all of a sudden that's what pushes you from competitive, they're a fun team, we don't want to play that team, they're tough, to, oh my goodness, we got to go to Pittsburgh in January and play a red hot Steelers team with an all-star quarterback and a great defense now. That's the type of place where they need to get to. And I mentioned in the chat here for everyone to start loading me up with quarterback questions or questions or maybe even your ideal 3-man QB room going into the season. And I think for a lot of fans, including myself early on, it was, I don't care what you got to do, go get the quarterback. But I've settled down on that a lot. And I would say, and we talked about it pre-show, that maybe the guys you got in your room right now, Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, or an equivalent to Mason Rudolph, Ryan Tannehill, something along those lines. And then go get a mid-round guy in the draft. And I think my target right now is the traits guy, Joe Milton, because I just see there's so many small quarterbacks in this draft. I would rather go get the big guy with all the talent in the world and see if you can't coach him up with this new offensive coaching staff, and see if that's a guy maybe you go down the road to, because you're kind of married to Kenny Pickett right now, and or the veteran secondary option here. So don't go trading up a bunch of draft picks to go get a first round quarterback. That's not going to be one of the top 2 guys anyway, because they're going to be gone. You're not going to get picks 1 or 2 in this draft because those teams need quarterbacks. So, and don't go spend $50 million on Kirk Cousins either for 2 years and then find yourself right back in the spot where you are now. Take your lumps a little bit if you have to with Pickett and or Rudolph, and trust maybe that the offensive system is going to be a good bit better to get you where you need to potentially be. So, Shannon, what's your thoughts on that idea?
Oh, again, we're on the same page. When you look at the teams, I wrote articles while your articles was out, part 1 and part 2. I wrote articles about things Steelers need to learn from the Final Four participants.
Yeah.
And one thing was the center position. They all had above average to elite play at the center position. They also had above average to elite play, lots of all pros at inside linebacker. These are 2 positions that have been weaknesses for the Steelers for years. When the Steelers did bring in Big Ben Roethlisberger, he came into a team, that had stability, and he was that final missing piece. He was kind of set up for success. And he was, again, he was a once in a lifetime, once in a generational player. But what I'm saying is, Mr. Rooney kind of said it himself in the interview that everybody keeps talking about. He said, see what the Steelers are capable of with adequate quarterback play.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to have. Yes, we've got Brock Purdy in the Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes. They couldn't be more different from where they were drafted to their style to anything. But if you look at these 2 teams, their rosters are loaded. If anything, the Chiefs need more talent on offense and wide receiver. Yeah. They're strong everywhere else. So, but yes, you want to find that quarterback, but that's the hardest thing to do in professional sports. If we look at the Houston Texans, they got the Browns to do the craziest trade I've ever seen. I ain't even talking about the contract they signed.
Right.
I want to do. I'm talking about the trade. They allowed the Texans, because for whatever reason, the Panthers passed on Stroud, which, before I said, don't do it. And they did it.
Yeah.
But you got your quarterback, and he was able to load your roster back up with young talent for him to grow with. That doesn't happen very often, folks. I don't see it. Even if the Steelers tried to trade Watt, you ain't going to get that kind of return.
Yeah.
So the Steelers it sounds like they're going to do it the right way. And we just have to be patient, because I think it's going to be a 2-year process.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, there's always a chance, and we can hope for this chance, that Kenny Pickett just needed something new to work in, or that Mason Rudolph, if he comes back, it had never really tapped the potential that he actually had with this team. So, I mean, there's some variables there that could work out in the Steelers' favor as well. But when you're looking at it holistically here, they're just not in a spot where they can afford financially to spend bucos and bucos of millions of dollars on the next franchise quarterback in a trade or in a free agency.
Or give up a lot of capital to move
exactly,
up.
Or give up a lot of capital to move up in the draft for that. They've got too many other holes that they need to fill, and they're in a position that they've put themselves in by drafting Kenny Pickett number 1 in a couple of years ago, and nothing wrong with that, but that's just where you're at. So let's not pretend that the Steelers are a day away in free agency or the draft from everything changing as far as the quarterback position goes, and they're finally back to contention status because they've got a superstar quarterback. That's just not how it's going to be for a couple years, and we'll see how it goes. Let's do a couple questions here. Afton has a couple. Before we move back onto the quarterbacks, let's talk a little bit about Andy Weidl. Are there any rumors about Weidl leaving? I haven't heard that he's interviewed anywhere except Washington. I know that there was some feelers put out to him, but I think he's committed to this team for at least this year. That's kind of the vibe I've been getting from the front office, is that he is heavily involved again in the offseason personnel moves that will be taking place, especially when you consider the draft. And I think he's going to be around. So I haven't heard anything new about Weidl garnering more interest, but I do know that if the Steelers have another draft like they did, another contributing class like they did, that he's probably going to end up as a general manager somewhere sooner rather than later. I just don't expect that to be this offseason. What do you think?
Oh, I agree. I think that he'll be here this year. As you say, if he has another knockout draft, though, because we know Khan is the money man. I mean, I ain't saying he don't know talent, but I'm just saying that he's more the numbers guy, whereas Weidl, he's the king of the round bellies, man. He knows that he recognizes talent. He has all the connections. A lot of the guys they were able to bring in free agency and even, to the practice squad is guys he was familiar with. Yeah. That's not Khan's game. So my opinion, this is where the Steelers got to enter this century. And what I mean is I want a bigger coaching staff that's more similar to what we have going on around the league. I also want them to handle the front office differently. There is no rule. There's no salary cap. There's nothing to keep them from having co-general managers and play to both these guys' strengths because they're both special. That's what I want to see. I don't want Weidl going anywhere for another 3 or 4 years because he's going to be key to this rebuild.
He is, absolutely. And the one thing that gets overlooked with this draft class, because you had Joey Porter Jr. was probably the standout performer of the group at cornerback. But, I mean, look at what he did in the trenches. Broderick Jones and Keanu Benton, those are going to be starting players for this team for several years, for many years down the road. And as an aside, I would like to see Broderick Jones as a starter on the left side for many years down the road, not the right side, but that is neither here nor there. So Afton, I don't think that the rumors are going to result in him leaving this offseason, but we will see down the road. All right. There are some quarterback questions. Let's take our break real quick here before the 15-minute mark of the show, just to get in our ad read for the audio side. If you're here live, don't go anywhere. We're not going anywhere. Stay tuned. All right, we're back here on the Steelers Sunday night Q&A. It's Sunday night for the foreseeable future because it is the off season, and got Shannon White here with me. We're talking all things Pittsburgh Steelers, but we're going to focus in a little bit on the quarterbacks here because I think that there's so many interesting directions that they could go, and any interesting directions that I would be in favor of too. That we kind of listed off our ideal circumstances to start out the show, both Shannon and I, considering who they have now, and then what they could do without sending a bunch of draft capital off somewhere to either trade for a guy in the draft or to, go trade for a big time QB that's a starter in the NFL right now. So let's go with Ashton Ford's first question here. And that is, which quarterback in the draft would you most like to target? I already mentioned Joe Milton III. Do you have a favorite of these guys that may be in the mid rounds there, Shannon?
I haven't really got to watch enough of them. Me and you was talking before we started the podcast. I was waiting to see who they hired as the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
To see who would fit into his system. Because not all quarterbacks are the right fit. Like you mentioned Milton, he's got a big arm. He's got the size. He would be very effective. Play action, being able to push the ball down the field. We've talked about people say we got to bring back Mason Rudolph. I'm like, well, I don't know yet. Because if you get a certain type of system, it might be a good fit. But he is a good fit for Arthur Smith's system. So
I agree.
As far as I've heard a lot about Pratt. So I tried to really focus on him this week because I didn't get to watch the Senior Bowl game. But I don't think he really helped himself a lot, but he didn't hurt himself a lot either. So he's still – the combine's going to matter. The pro day is going to matter. And we see fortunes change these next 2 months. So, but I also – we talked before the show about Rattler, Spencer Rattler, a 5-star prospect who never could seem to find his fit. So is that because, he's all athleticism, arm talent, and maybe he's not, as good on progressions and the above the shoulders part. So a lot of those questions will be answered in the next few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a little off on this, but I kind of see Rattler as a poor man's Bryce Young. And that, he may be a little bit taller than Bryce Young, but
he's thicker.
A little thicker than Bryce
Young's
Young.
Too thin. Way thin.
Yeah. You and I talked about that a lot leading up to last draft class, how we were like, go get Stroud. Don't mess this up. Go get Stroud. Don't get Young. But the Panthers didn't have either of us in the front office there, Shannon, and they're wishing they did currently, I think. So
I bet you that the Texans wouldn't have took Young.
If Stroud
right. went one, I bet you they'd have skipped him.
Yeah, I think.
And
you're
also
right. They would have
say
figured something else out.
Don't be surprised if this year's class is overrated.
Yeah,
and I'll tell you why. If you remember, the same class that Mahomes come out in, Trubisky come out in, Rosen come out in, all these guys. Out of about 8 guys, 2 of them turned out to be stars. And then you had a lot of guys that mostly missed. And everybody's talking about Caleb Williams being the next Mahomes. I do not like his makeup and his temperament at all. And the stuff he's already demanding and saying, I would not touch him with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. There's when you look at now it as a group for the Pittsburgh Steelers here, when we're talking quarterbacks, I'm so over all the we've got to trade up into that top 5. We've got to go get that guy. It's such a crapshoot as it is, right? Even if you're picking up there, then why are you saying, okay, package all these picks and go move up there and try to get your guy? I mean, if you're absolutely desperate, but the Steelers should not be seeing themselves as absolutely desperate this offseason. I think they've got enough in place to stay competitive here and to, like we've said, build that roster up and then take your time to find the guy. The guy that intrigues me, and I think intrigues a lot of people, because I don't think you would have to give up a whole lot for this guy, is Justin Fields. 2 Girls, 1 Stanley Cup says ideal room would have Justin Fields in it. And then she says, what would be an ideal trade for Fields compensation wise? And I mentioned this. I've been doing this daily drive snippet on Twitter every weekday because I drive a lot for work. So I've been doing a little video snippet during that, my Steelers thoughts for the day. And on Friday, I mentioned Justin Fields and how I thought that based on what we saw with Arthur Smith and Marcus Mariota, that he could be a good fit in an Arthur Smith offense. He's obviously more talented than Mariota, and I think also that the Bears would not be so so high priced when they're talking about moving Fields, because they're likely going to pick at number 1 a quarterback, and they've got another first round pick already as well. So I'm thinking that maybe a third round pick would land Justin Fields. Maybe you throw in a player to that as well, or a 7th rounder. I mean, I wouldn't hate a 3rd round pick and a 7th round pick for Justin Fields or a player. Is it my ideal 3-man room? Maybe not, but if you're gonna make a play for the guy with a bunch of upside, then this would be the one to me that doesn't kill your draft capital, and also gives you a shot at potentially getting in a talent that exceeds anything you've had in the room since Roethlisberger. So that would be something I would consider. Shannon, are you in on Justin Fields at all, or is that one of those, let's not go that route?
I think if he comes, he would have one more reasonable year under contract before you'd have to sign him. I've seen that they're saying that they believe Baker Mayfield is going to get $40 million plus a year. Is what they're talking about. Danny Jones money, which we know that was not a wise contract.
No.
So I don't know what Fields would rate, considering his draft, status, and especially if he was successful. But if you found your next franchise quarterback, you just have to make it work.
Yeah.
But I've heard people say, well, what if you traded a player plus a pick, like Deontay Johnson and a 3rd or 4th rounder for Fields? I think it'd be worth a shot. Yeah, they got 2 4th round picks. They might trade one of them. Yep. There's a young man here that the name keeps popping up from Florida State, quarterback Travis.
Yeah, Jordan Travis. Yeah.
Before he got hurt, Travis has better than average athleticism. He's not Fields, but he's got better than average. But he also has leadership, and he has an instinctual feel for the game. That's the only thing about Fields that I've still not seen. Before, they asked him to run all the time. And 2 years ago, he had over 1,000 yards, and he was dominant on the ground. Last year, they said, throw from the pocket. And they kind of handcuffed him. And he had some big games throwing the ball, especially to DJ Moore. But in other games, he looked really bad. And so you got to find that peaceful medium with him. And I do think he could fit into Arthur Smith's offense. So it would really come down to what Smith and the other offensive coaches, what conclusion they come to and what they're willing to give up.
Yeah, exactly. I see a lot of comments about Justin Fields being a poor passer, and he's not a great passer, but I mean, we were all over Kenny for dirt balling throws all season, and Justin Fields has at least some 4 touchdown games under his belt. I mean, what are we talking about here? There's no comparison to me. I think Justin Fields is vastly more talented than Kenny Pickett, and give him a shot in an offense where he can be maybe unleashed and guided a little bit better than he was in Chicago. I think it's worth a shot personally, but some people are going to be on the Justin Fields hate train, and that's fine. I see the reasoning behind it. I do understand that he is not the most accurate quarterback, but if you're saying that compared to what we have, I mean, on the roster under contract, which is just Kenny Pickett really, and Mitch Trubisky, who's going to be cut, he is definitely an upgrade on those 2 guys, in my opinion. So I get it. I get the angst with bringing him in, but for a 4th round pick and a player, I think that would be a wise move by the Steelers to at least give it a shot. If he doesn't work out, you don't have to pay him. And if he does work out and you've got your franchise guy, then pay him and go from there. You've just moved up the timeline from the Kenny Pickett timeline up a year is all you've done. And so that would be my consideration with it. Let's see here. Let's do, here we go. from Chris G. I'm a big Deontay Johnson fan and don't want to see him in another uniform, but does he fit Arthur Smith's system? Need physical wide receivers that block aggressively. Already seeing you're shaking your head in the negative there about Deontay Johnson fitting. Tell us a little bit more about why you don't believe that he is a fit in this Arthur Smith offense.
Well, again, he's a run to set up the pass guy. He wants guys who are enthusiastic blockers, bigger body receivers. They don't have to be necessarily real tall, but they got to be thick. If you think back to the Tennessee Titans, man, you had A.J. Brown blowing people away. He was such a great blocker. And, a lot of those long runs by Henry was just, and hustle. Every one of their receivers stayed alive and to make blocks downfield because they knew Henry would bust one eventually. So that's not Deontay Johnson's game. He doesn't like contact. He shies away from the middle. He shies away. He goes down before contact usually. So I would like to see some sturdier built guys to work the middle of the field because Arthur Smith will work the middle of the field. And it can't always be one of the tight ends. So, I think that's why I mentioned Deontay Johnson as a possible inclusion in a trade because he would have more value somewhere else than I think he'll have in Arthur Smith's offense.
Yeah. I mean, just as like a potential trade, I mean, he would have major success in a Kansas City offense.
Exactly.
He absolutely would. A finesse offense that relies on quarterbacks making throws, and Mahomes has been playing a lot more in rhythm the last few years without Tyreek Hill there, and Deontay Johnson is that kind of player. But I mean, this is my statement on Deontay Johnson here, and I don't hate the guy. I think he's a good player in the right style, but I do think that he's got a little bit of an attitude problem. I think he bought into I'm the wide receiver one here in Pittsburgh after I'm the next Antonio Brown, and that hasn't worked out quite yet. It never will. But here's my thought. You thought Deontay Johnson was an attitude problem last year. Wait till he's asked to block on 2/3 of his plays that he runs out there and only go on routes on 1/3 of those. And you're going to see a lot more of an issue out of Deontay Johnson because you're right. He's not wired for that type of physicality. And I mean, I'm not trying to knock on the guy. I'm not trying to bury him, but that's just the way it is with this guy. So, all right, let's move on to Tom Vallejo says they were saying on Get Up, the Steelers should trade for Dak Prescott and trade Kenny Pickett. This is the type of thing we were talking about, Shannon. Don't do this. Don't go trading for Dak Prescott and sending 2 first-round picks and your second this year and a second next year and totally screwing yourself in the draft. Don't go doing that, right?
We've got to a point in a society, but especially in the NFL circles, whereas statistics supposedly matter, and we know Dak's had a big season, led the league in touchdown passes, but I mean, I remember Dan Fouts. I remember even Dan Marino. I remember guys that put up incredible stats that never could win the big one. They just didn't win in clutch time. And what's Dak's ever proved? What has Prescott ever proved that he's a clutch player?
Yeah.
Or that, I'm just not interested. I mean, and there's always drama. Drama seems to follow him. Even guys that it seem like he's the best friend in the world. And then the next thing you know, they're putting mean tweets out about him. So, I mean, that's not the answer. Moving forward, I don't see it being the answer. A lot of people like to say things, as I say, to get numbers, clicks, stuff of that nature. But Dak Prescott is not coming to Pittsburgh.
No, and nor should he. No. That's just not going to happen. So
Big G would die.
Agree with you. Yeah.
Big G would die. Literally, he would die. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. we'd be calling the squad for that man.
Exactly.
All right. Brian Brown puts out a very pertinent question here. A good one. What is wrong with trying to re-sign Rudolph? The Steelers offense ran just fine under Mason. Were we watching the same last 4 games? I am completely down with them re-signing Mason Rudolph and giving him a shot. And honestly, if he comes back, personally, I would say to Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett, Mason played better than you last year, Kenny. He's our number one guy unless you can prove us otherwise. That would be how I would go into this season, personally. And so I'm definitely down, Brian, with getting Rudolph back. A lot of what we were talking about is predicated on the fact that I just don't know if that's going to happen. I think somebody's going to pay for Mason Rudolph, and if somebody's going to be willing to pay him $12 million a year, are the Steelers going to be willing to do that with still trying to find out what they've got in Kenny Pickett and all the other needs that they're going to have to address? That's kind of my concern there. But if he does come back, and I would love for them to try to pursue that, obviously, I do think that he should be given at least an equal shot at the taking the driver's seat at quarterback, and maybe even first preference. What do you think?
Yes, I will preface this comment by saying that Kenny Pickett had one game, without Matt Canada,
Cincinnati,
with somebody else calling the plays, and Mason had more than that, and Mason done a great job, and he looked like what an 8-year veteran should look like. That being said, I think he deserves every chance to have a fair quarterback competition if he'll sign back here to win that position next year. The problem is he said they were really good to him, even though a lot of people say they weren't.
Yeah.
But you can't say, well, Ben wasn't warm and fuzzy with me, but we're talking about the whole organization.
Yeah.
I don't even think Tomlin was high on Rudolph because that's Colbert's guy. Yeah. Colbert's been hooked to Rudolph ever since he drafted. And so Tomlin only played Rudolph when he had no other choice. Everybody's got to understand that. There was no other choice, and he had to play Rudolph. Now, Rudolph did good, and then he started him again because they needed a spark, and he made Kenny sit, even though Kenny wanted to come back. It made sense, But I would just say that if you look around the league, where is Mason going to get more money? Because I think teams view him at best as a Gardner Minshew type. At best.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think teams still view him as a quality backup, as I've always said. So if he comes back to Pittsburgh, one, he might get a little bit more money somewhere else. I don't know. But he will get a better chance to start in Pittsburgh than he will anywhere else. Because I don't believe the Steelers are going to go reaching for anybody at quarterback. They would rather reach for him. And I think his best decision for his career moving forward will be to come back to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's some comments in here that a lot of people don't think that Tomlin will give him a fair shot at the number one spot. So, there's going to be some anxiety in that regard too if he does come back, and I'd assume that he will have some similar thoughts based on how based on the way some of the last few years have gone for him. But it is an intriguing thought all the same to see how the Steelers will handle Mason Rudolph and whether or not he'll get a good contract somewhere else. I mean, I think of a team like the Seahawks as an example here. They're paying Geno Smith a fair chunk of money, right? To be their starter, and they've got a new coaching staff, a new play caller. It's a whole new set of guys in charge over there. And so I wonder if they'd be like, let's see what we could get in a trade for Geno Smith, and then go sign a guy for $10 million like Mason Rudolph, who I think would kind of translates to really any system pretty well. Except for like a full-on RPO Jalen Hurts offense. You know what I mean? None of that, please. But, I could see a team like that saying, let's move on from our high-priced veteran quarterback and go get somebody kind of on the up in that same vein until we can draft somebody, because they're not in a position to draft a quarterback this year either. So they would be a team in a situation like that. The Broncos, to me as well, would be a team in that type of situation where they're like, let's move on for our high price guy. We've got a bunch of new people in the building here. We don't really know what we want yet. So let's save some money at quarterback for a season that we're not quite sure what we're going to do, and then worry about quarterback next year and build up the roster, kind of like we've been talking about the Steelers. I could see Mason Rudolph being attractive to a team like that. So let's talk about what Steel Dog 88 says here. With Arthur Smith as our new OC, do you think they try to bring in Ryan Tannehill for competition? I think if Rudolph doesn't come back, then Tannehill is the guy to watch. I really do, because he's not going to be expensive, and he would be a fantastic mentor for Kenny Pickett. I think he would be quite aware of where he's at in his career as well, and would understand that he's probably not competing with Kenny to start. He's just kind of the backup guy there if Kenny really, really struggles and doesn't get it. And if Kenny gets it, he can be a great mentor. I would love to have Tannehill in from that perspective. What about you?
Now everybody tries to carry 3 quarterbacks, have that emergency guy active, which actually kept Rudolph in the NFL. We got to remember. But I got to watch a good bit of Titans games last year, and I think Tannehill, when you get to a certain age, he didn't have A.J. Brown anymore. He didn't have the guys that he did have. Henry wasn't the same. But I think Tannehill's on the back nine, and, he's getting ready to go to the clubhouse. I mean, as a mentor, but we kind of did that this year with Robertson. And we brought him in and said, well, he's going to be a good example, and he's going to – and I don't think they got the impact out of that they thought they were going to get. I think Pickett is the guy that, if he's got the work ethic. He puts in the hours. He puts in the film study. If he doesn't make it, it's going to be a lack of talent, not a lack of effort. Yeah. So, I'm just not that interested around Tannehill at all, to be honest.
Sure. Yeah, and understandable too. I mean, he's definitely on the back 40 of his career. So, absolutely. One more quarterback question here, and then we'll kind of change the subject real quick before we go. Ron Chess says, does Mason stay? The nice QB to pick in the 3rd or 4th round is the Florida State quarterback that broke his leg, Jordan Travis. He follows that up. Jordan Travis from quarterback from Florida State, 3rd and 4th round. We talked about him already. We talked about Mason Rudolph already, but that's what I really see happening here is the Steelers ride with Kenny, try to re-sign Mason. If that doesn't work out, they go get a Ryan Tannehill type, and then they draft a mid-round, late-round quarterback to develop or to be their 3rd guy. That's just kind of how I see it playing out. So Travis would be very intriguing from that regard. He is another smaller quarterback, but I think the arm talent is definitely there. And he seems to be a guy kind of in the mold of Rattler where the field vision, because they've had to compensate for their height probably most of their lives at the position, their field vision is pretty good. He kind of understands the flow of offense and defense pretty well. At least that's what I saw when I watched the tape from Jordan Travis. So definitely a route I would be looking at here. Shannon, before we go here, and we're wrapping it up real quick, but Mark Lancaster says we have to address inside linebacker in this draft. I think you and I would both agree with that. This offseason, inside linebacker does need some addressing, whether that's free agency or the draft or both. It definitely needs to happen. I'm a little iffy on Jeremiah Trotter Jr., but I mean, he's in the mold of a Steeler type linebacker if they wanted to go with an athletic younger guy. What do you think about JTJ, or do you have another target that you're looking at this offseason?
Well, I've just started to really dive in because the Steelers have to get a young stud. Yeah. All the great Steeler defenses was led by a young alpha middle linebacker. And they just haven't had one for so long. And I like Trotter, but I think he's an early 2nd round pick, in my opinion. I don't think he's a 1st round pick. So I don't think he'll be there at 51 when the Steelers would, consider him in the 2nd round. So that throws the timing off. Now there's some guys like Gray and I'm trying to think what the other guy's name is. I can't remember now. I just watched some stuff on him. But
Is it the Edgerrin something or other? He's my favorite linebacker in the class. Texas A&M linebacker.
Yes, but I can't think of his name right now.
Cooper, Edgerrin Cooper.
There it is. Somebody just put it up here. Cooper. Yes,
Edgerrin Cooper. Yeah.
I like his all around game, and he's got a lot of. Now I ain't comparing him to Warner, because Warner's the best out there right now for the 49ers, Fred Warner. But what I like about him is he really has no glaring weakness, and he has a natural feel for the position, and he's definitely an alpha. And that's what I want there. I want a guy who is going to be able to have the green dot, who's going to be able to, be the leader and control the huddle. So, there's a few free agents, but here's what's sad, Jeremy. Last year, the offseason, it was loaded. Yeah. I wrote articles after articles. They was 7 deep at free agent. They was a ton of guys. I watched Dorian Williams just ball out for the Bills.
Yeah.
All season. And he was my sleeper guy.
Yeah.
And, maybe I wrote about him too much because the Bills took him earlier than the Steelers would. But
man, his name came up so much.
It's not that deep this year.
Yeah.
So there's guys that fit their good coverage or their good run, but there's not too many combo guys. So, Cooper is one that I think would definitely be a target. But I'm going to start doing my research, and I'll be putting out some articles.
Yeah. Hey, Shannon, I don't know if you're aware of a certain free agent linebacker that's going to be at the top of the list for a lot of teams, and it's one of the Devons. Devin White is a free agent this offseason, and I could see the Steelers snagging a Devin White on like a 1-year prove-it deal after a rough season and seeing how that goes, because I know they were extremely high on him in that draft. Yes, Tomlin loved him. Yes. And if he does end up walking from Tampa Bay, I could see the Steelers going that direction pretty quickly. And I mean, if you look at it, he's still only 25 years old. He's young. And it wasn't a great season, but he's been overshadowed by Levante David over there anyway. So maybe a chance to be the alpha dog linebacker somewhere else would be something he would take a jump at for a lesser contract. And so I don't know, keep an eye on Devin White. And when you connect the dots from what the Steelers like to do in free agency, a lot of times it's those guys they missed in the draft that are coming on their second contract that didn't quite live up to expectations. Those are the guys that they try to go after. What do you think?
Well, you look at a guy like James Ferrier. These guys get to come to Pittsburgh and the standard has been set and they seem like they elevate their play. I was very happy with Holcomb and Roberts and Alexander, but again, they're, injury prone. That's why, we don't know who'll be back and when they'll be back. So, I think White could come in and flourish. And kind of like, Roquan Smith was good, but when he got to the Ravens and he was in the shadow and the hallowed halls of Ray Lewis, he took his game to another level. I could see that happening with White.
Yes, I could too. A couple other names being kind of thrown out here are Maurice Liufau. I don't know. These Islander names are so hard for me, and I apologize. The Steel Familia asked about that. Notre Dame linebacker. I know who he is. I just cannot pronounce his name. A good size player. I think he was a finalist for the Butkus Award this year. So he's a good player.
He's a run first guy, though.
Yes, he is. He's not the kind of coverage linebacker that the team might be searching for, since they have a Landon Roberts under contract still. So we'll see about that. And then Mark Lancaster mentions Tommy Eichenberg from Ohio State at 51. I like Eichenberg. I don't think he's the ultra athlete that they might need at the position. So
but he's a dog.
He's kind of, he is. He's a dog. He's a tough player. So those are definitely guys that'll be on the radar for this team. Day 2, early day 3, something along those lines. That's when I'd expect them to make a play there. I think that they've got their eyes on some offensive linemen in the early portion of the draft. But Shannon, any final thoughts, man, before we head out? It looks like the questions are kind of slowing down here. What you got?
Well, I love a lot of the suggestions and guys that they're
Yeah.
talking about looking at, like Snead and Willie Gay, talking about
Yeah.
Patrick Queen. You know, those guys from a bitter rival, a lot of times they don't want to go to, unless there's bad blood, and then they want to go there and prove a point. But I don't know if he'd want to come to Pittsburgh. And I'd probably like to go another direction myself. But I had a great show, great time with you. Love talking to Steelers. And
Absolutely.
like I said, check out my article tomorrow at 11 o'clock approximately. And again, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. And Patrick Queen, he's going to Seattle. Mike McDonald's over there. He's going to Seattle.
Get him on the West Coast. Get him out of here.
Get him out of here. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we appreciate all of you tuning in to the show. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate your arguments for your players. We appreciate all of it, because what we like to do here is have a discussion, have a conversation. This is the Q&A, and we'll be back next Sunday. We'll have another guest on. It's going to be fun. Thanks again to Shannon. Definitely check out his work. Check out all the podcasts he's on. They're all a fantastic listen. And we will talk to you next time here on the Steelers Q&A. Bets out and Shannon White out.